G'day viewers, it's Michael here again and welcome back to Single Racer. And now, with the help of one of my fantastic new subscribers, I'm able to get back to the video I originally was going to do last video, but ran into a bit of trouble, a bug if you like, that is actually technically still there, but thanks to this subscriber, they showed me how to fix this so-called bug, and I'll cover that in a second. But it worked out well, because since that time Automobilista 2 has been updated again to version 0.9.3.1. so what I want to do now is test 3 separate things, and I hope it's of benefit to you all. And so the first thing I wanted to test was the AI, but I think everyone is covering the AI from a certain point of view, which is, how do they drive themselves, how does it feel to drive against them, things like that. But I noticed a particular pattern that was happening in, say, the last 3 updates that I want to test specifically, and so if you can bear with me, let me explain. Now, if you said that an alien sim racing driver was 100%, then I would rate myself somewhere between 70 and 80%. And I don't mean that egotistical, I just mean that from the point of view that I often do online races in Assetto Corsa, and I'm almost always in the top 10 when I qualify. But a 90% driver will always beat me, so I might get to 6th or 7th spot, maybe even 4th, but I really struggle to catch those drivers ahead of me, and they generally pull away from me. So I feel that I'm capable, but I'm definitely not an alien. But I think the key thing here is this varies based on the car I drive, meaning that if I drive a heavily turboed car, which is my weakness, or an F1 car, I'm probably closer to 60% in that scale. But if I drive something like the Lotus 49 that I'm very familiar with, I might be as high as 85-90% against compared to other drivers. But what I noticed in Automobilista 2 with the AI is there was almost this split. So what would happen is if I raced against 9 other drivers making a 10-car field, I noticed that what seemed to happen after, say, 4 or 5 laps is you would have the first 4 cars race away on me, but then the cars behind me tended to fall away as well, and I was often left racing on my own, and there seemed to be consistently a big gap between the top cars and the bottom cars falling away, rather than being a nice spread across all the cars, which I hear Reza is trying desperately to fix in the next update, possibly before version 1 gets released. But the second thing I wanted to answer, because that does kind of fall under how does the AI behave, but the second thing I wanted to cover then was how much does a full field of AI cars, which is more intensive arguably on the CPU, how does that affect your frame rates? Because in most races so far I've only done a 10-car field including myself, but what happened if I made the AI up to its maximum, which I believe is 31 cars, and how much does that have an effect on the frame rates of this excellent running sim? This sim runs so smoothly that I was curious to find that out. And so the way I thought of actually doing this covers off the third thing, which I believe has only been added since the last update, and that is the ability to finally save the replays. Now that is a big key thing for me as a creator, because it's in my natural way of behaving, that when I drive in VR, it sits quite high, I've got a high jawline, and so when I drive in VR, not only am I shaky when I drive live, but when I try and attempt to talk, the VR just goes up and down like crazy. It's just shocking to watch. Even I don't like watching it. So what I do is I often get the replay and then hold the VR as a camera, kind of like steady, so that it's pleasant, or at least hopefully pleasant to watch. And I always include a 2D replay anyway, just in case you wanted to see that. So what I thought I would do was, because in a 9-car field or a 9-car AI field where I'm the 10th driver, the minimum frame rates will be at the start of the race. And so what I thought I would do is just do one lap in a 10-car field and get the average, minimum and maximum frame rates just on that, and then save the replay. And just, if you don't know how to show how you save and access that replay, and then do a full field of technically 32 cars, so it's 31 AI and myself making up the 32 car field, and see how much difference that adds, especially to the minimum frame rates compared to a 10 car field. But what I'll also be interested in is what's key for me as a creator or a sim racing channel is what will be the average frame rates of that whole race, but also can I save the race and then go back to the race and do part of it in VR, and then hopefully what you're seeing here as I talk behind me is the 2D version of that same replay. In other words, unplugging the VR and then being able to access the same replay in 2D and switch between the two. But just before we go racing, I'd like to cover off on two bits of housekeeping, because I was initially confused when I tried to practice a one-lap race to figure out myself how the replay works. And what appeared to happen as compared to the previous AMS2 updates was what I thought was a bug, which technically is still a bug, but thanks to a brand new subscriber by the name of Samim, he helped me figure out what I needed to do. So the bug was that I could change any of these settings with the actual red button slider here. All right, now just to prove that, if I go out now and that's set to 70, when I come back it stays at 70, and this happens on all the sliders except one, and that was the steering sensitivity, where if I changed it with the manual red slider like this, it would go back to the previous thing. So if you watch it, it should go back to 100, and that seemed a bug. So if I tried to set it to 80 and go back, it would go back to 100 as I flicked out. And thanks to Samim, who just suggested that what it needs is to actually use the arrows to flick through. So if I set it to 90 as the example, now by using the arrows instead of the slider, when I go out, it doesn't change. So it clearly is a bug, but thanks very much to Samim for that fix. So I'll use the arrows to set it to 100, which I use for a very tight wheel rotation, and it'll stay that way as you can see here. So thank you again for that fix. And so now it's finally time to go racing. But if you ever want to revisit this video, I'll have the timestamps, so you can just skip all this talk and go straight to the racing section of the video. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do just one lap using this incredible new Opala 1986 car on the Spielberg track, but the historic version, the 1974 version. And all I'm going to do is set the opponents to 9 and do one lap, simply because in this test I want to get the minimum frame rate, and given that all the cars are bunched up on the start line, that's the maximum that the CPU will have on usually on any given video or like on your computer. and as the cars spread out, it tends to make it much easier, and you get higher frame rates anyway. So I just want the minimum frame rates to do this. So what I'm using is an unregistered version of a program called FPS Monitor, or frames per second monitor, and I was rapt to find out that this can be bought on Steam itself, and I'll show you that here if you ever want to get it for yourself. Now I'm just showing the frame rates at the time, the minimum, maximum and average, but it shows all the computer, or the CPU voltages, the memory voltages, all details like that, but just for the sake of the simplicity of this video, I've switched that all off. So if it looks like something you might be interested in, you can get it on Steam. So now it's finally time to go racing. So this is Michael signing out for Single Racer. I'll catch you next time. See you later, and let's go racing. Okay folks, so hopefully you could see there by the scores that I got an average of 75 to 80 frames per second, and it only jumped up once the race was over, up to about 90, so you can't really take that into account. But the average being 75 to 80 is pretty good, with 9 AI and myself making up a 10 car field. So now let's increase the field and see what happens to the actual frame rates. But first, hopefully you saw at the end of that video that I clicked on what is essentially an old school floppy disk icon to tell you that you can save the replay. Now, from testing in doing this one lap race, I found that it also seems to be a bit buggy at this stage, because what would happen was it would appear that just by going into the replay and selecting the replay, that saved it for you. But what happened in my case was it didn't initially show that floppy disk icon. So I found that by going out of the replay and back in, then the icon would appear. And so just to make sure, I clicked on it. Now in that case, it saved the same replay twice, but on this occasion the icon appeared first and I clicked on it and it's only saved it once. So to view the replay, you come up here to either the camera icon and there's your replay saved, or you can go to what I assume is your Steam name, I gather, because I don't type the name into AMS2 specifically, so I'm assuming that's just your Steam name and you can see it there. So either of those two will show the replay. Now what I wanted to do was put the field up now to 31 cars and myself making a 32 car field, but I just found out stupidly without testing it that given that this is an historic track, it will only let me go up to 16. So what I'm going to have to do is select the Spielberg GP track, which is actually Red Bull Ring, but that shouldn't matter too much because it's really just a general test, and the track layout is very, very similar anyway, so it shouldn't make too much of a difference. But this way now, by selecting the track, I can go up to a 32 car field. Now I won't talk in this replay, and what we'll do is we'll confirm that and we'll set it to 7 laps, which will give me enough baseline to get a fairly regular frame rate average, just to see how it handles more cars. So let's now see how a 32 car field affects the average frame rates. And so what did I end up learning by all this? Well, apart from the fact that half of 32 is 16 and I finish 18th, maybe I should rate myself as 50 to 60% out of 100 instead of 70 or 80%. But putting that aside, under the carpet actually, what I learnt was this sim is so well tuned as far as graphical requirements goes, because to get an average of 65 to 75 frames per second with a full 32 car field in the first lap is superb in my eyes, and the fact that it grew as you raced up to about 82 frames per second, I think that is excellent given the fact that this is still in beta or early access version. So there's plenty of fine tuning to come. The other thing I learnt too is there's still a little bit of separation between the really strong and really weak. I genuinely felt I only held up maybe one or two cars. I probably should have finished 20th given the ability of the cars around me at 100%, but I still think that I didn't hold the cars behind me up too much, so there does seem in a larger field still a bit of a gap between the very good and the very bad across the whole field. But I do still have to say that I did notice that the field seemed much better to race against. Not perfect, and Reza has declared that the AI strength is something they're going to work on next, so that's great. And just on a side note, for me personally, it was fantastic to learn, so I saved that replay. I went out of it because I decided to do the whole thing in 2D and came back into it wearing my VR, and I could watch the whole replay in VR. So if I wanted to choose certain segments to record using the VR headset, I could, and then revert back to that same replay using 2D instead, which is fantastic for us sim racing creators. So I hope you got something out of that, and I hope you enjoyed it. So this is Michael signing out for Single Racer. I'll catch you next time. See you later.